Video 103, The Ancient Lives of Hillary Clinton, the President's Wife, explained by the ancient spirit tralaka, here flowing the information here for the video. Now, Hillary, long ago, at least as her life stream shows her life in this small, minor planetary system. The twin suns of that system had already dimmed quite a bit because of the eons of age already weighing upon those suns. It is here she would spend 4 lifetimes, which were long, as a straight reptilian being. She stood at 6 feet 10 inches tall, no tail. However, it was quite a conflicting war in that planetary system between reptilian beings with wings versus those who had a tail, versus those who had wings and a tail, and those who had neither nor. Although the massive Draco-controlled areas of planetary systems was very far to the right of that small system. This was the reasoning right here behind the earlier Draconian Empire War. That is why they never went to that small system and seized it, because that system was just too far away from the mainstream traffic for commerce. The ancient Draco dragons in that Empire War, they knew very much of that inner fighting between the reptilians in that system. This would be just too much effort for the Draco dragons to be able to fight them and be able to defeat them, because they would have to afterwards still be the referees between all those variables of reptilians who could not get along. This left that Gurgamisan planetary system to the reptilians, mostly to themselves, though only 6 inhabited, mostly within planets, and 9 long small moons. So the last one was not so much from a moon as an asteroid, though. It was an eyesore. It was an eyesore from a distance. The heavily scored surfaces on most of the planets from the many ages of war. But it was here that it would be the place to be able to journey to, if you could, to buy the extra heavy-duty armored fighter crafts they had. But you had to be able to survive the going there and be able to survive coming out of their system because of the heavy warring between them all. The heavy shielding was also used on much of the buildings on the surface of the planets that were around the entry and exit point caverns. This led to the deep down inside to the different cities underneath the surface of those planets. When they came to the surface to like walk in the bluish, lush forests in spots that had survived through the wars, you risked a chance to be sniped off by any variations of different reptilians who decided he did or she didn't like you. But her here, in this lifetime, her body's thicker scales were to protect her very well. She had 5 rows of 3-inch tall scales that came to points. This ran from the top of her shoulders to her waist. The front of her arms had 3 rows of small raised scales that ran up to her shoulders that were kept sharpened. They were also on the front of her legs and feet. Otherwise, like the others, they were also sharpened, always sharpened. She was dangerous to get in a fight with. Though her head had something of a human-like roundness, she had this 14-inch jawline in front of her face with 2 rows of teeth, and both of them were sharp. Now, if you remember from other videos, that a lot of times if there's 2 rows, the front one will be sharp, the back one will be flat. However, she was of the species that had both rows being very sharp. The teeth in the mid-colored, swirly white and brown looks. This look was, though not much difference between the species in that small system, but this also aided to keep the smaller variables of species either killed off or kept as servants for ages. Her greenish red eyes, a bit large for her head though, however, though great for seeing in the battles, more red in the darkness and more green in the sunlight, 6 3 1/3 long claws, 6 3 1/3 long claws on her feet, sharpened, thick 1.5 inch claws on her hands. Very dangerous even to look there to think you would survive. She was part of the dominating ruling class of reptilians in that Gorgominesian planetary system. Not here the biggest group, but they were far smarter. Their experiments long ages before discovered hyperspace and other technology and know-how, but they kept it very sparingly and secret for many ages from others. At a young age, she was promoted to the military spy program, using a front of being an illegal drug merchant, giving her the perfect information highway to harvest information in all the directions she had her customers, while also padding her pockets with the Durkin money cubes. They appeared as different sized clear gold cubes with different symbols on each side. With this here, now this type of money was good for trade and purchase between all the variables or reptilians in that system. So they had something going for them. They had a common money system. In her fourth life in that system, she was of a snake being species, which controlled 2 of the small moons on that system. At 7 feet and 1/2 inches tall, slender scaled body with silvery green tones on her scaled body, with softly rippled snake muscles flowing beneath. Her legs thick and strong, but shorter. Her smaller arms were very fast in movement. She had fingers on each hand with much longer, flatter thumbs. Her head was something in human form, yet the same silvery green scaled skin. Her eyes are greenish with the double closure eyelids, the inner one smoky, the outer one light black. Spending her life both working as a cargo ship worker, although mostly with the strapping the cargo down and then removing the straps when the cargo ship she was with would come to port. But her main thing was she was studying to become a navigator for one of those cargo ships, especially the upcoming new class of cargo ships of her species. However, in that life, she only gained a limited number of trips each year as a navigator in order to keep her within that loop of trained personnel, though just barely. But in her next 3 lives, where she would be in the Vega planetary systems as a snake humanoid, her first here as a snake humanoid, which would be quite different as her inner spirit was used to being reptilian in form and so forth. But here she is humanoid, a Vega humanoid, with the variables with snake and humans influence. As she matured and began space fighter training, but she learned to love that humanoid form that her inner spirit was in, especially since all the training fighter craft ships were designed for humanoid variations of form only. Strangely, when she graduated, you would think she would have gone to being in the big fighter squadrons. No, this is not what happened. She accepted the invite to become a pilot for a civilian rescue, u.f.o, rescue space capable ships. that also came with very heavy armor to be able to go and rescue in dangerous areas, as well as those ships had maxed out quad flex magnetic ring drives and power plants. These ships that she aided in flying were the thing to have. In her last life, she was a reptilian humanoid in the Vega planetary systems. Standing at 7 feet 8 inches tall, her reptilian scaly skin was smoother in form, looking more humanoid, which would help her in her battle of being a spy for the highest bidder. As her years grow long, she purchased her own dome planetary property, which was usually in the price range that only small to mid-sized cities would be able to buy, usually not that of a civilian or one who went back to being a civilian. Though this one was at the foot of a set of mountains, the twin suns setting between the mountains each solar evening. With 500 spans to the left of her property was a very steep cliff. Now, Hillary's next 5 lifetimes was on Tiamat. Not surprising here, she was on Tiamat, otherwise known as Maladek. As a reptilian humanoid, 3 times she was, 7 feet 1 inches tall, spending a split career as a spy, again, for the military. At least, let's put it this way. She was a spy for the highest paying military, no matter what form that military may look like. The highest bidder got her services. Using the pioneer business to whitewash all the loads of funds she was making for spying and illegal trades, to making sure she would put in the pioneer trade space-going ships and their land-based ships and vehicles, very special little compartments she had designed for, and so cleverly to smuggle in, and no matter where they were going, to be able to smuggle in area goods that normally were not available to civilians. Now, this is very sad. It is very sad moments for that sizable percentages of pioneers that used her services as pioneers. They became corrupt even before the settlement was large enough to be able to be self-sufficient. Her next 2 lives were that of a Draco humanoid. As a female, she stood at 7 feet 8 inches tall. The humanoid aspect of her body, one could definitely see she had some Draco heritage under her skin, the Draco coarser rippling muscles. Her skin, though, was more humanly smooth. Her scales a brownish light green, eyes a soft black, though a bit larger. Her mouth jawline was only 3 inches in front of her face, though, having 2 small rows of teeth. The front row sharper, naturally not sharpened, and the back row flat. Larger feet she had, with 6 toes on each foot and 6 fingers on each hand. She was homeschooled. Here, we're talking in all these videos from Tralaka. Here is the first case of being homeschooled as a child for spy training from her father, who had been a retired, for quite some time, spy man. She advanced when she got out of the other schools. In the formal training, she aided for the spying very quickly from this other information. She was like a 5-star spy by the time she got out of formal school. But her career, other hand, would be spent as a space fighter pilot in the wars against the pinheaded beings from the planets that used to be past the orbit of Pluto, that would send in very heavily armed raiding parties, ships to port towns to try to shut down the distribution points, so the ships coming in to receiving would have to leave empty. from Tiamat. But from those lifetimes, then she would spend 10, that's a lot of lifetimes, on those 2 planets that used to be past the orbit of Pluto. 7 of them were that of being a Draco-humanoid. Now, this lifetime was full of double-back, triple-back deals with the enemy and her fellow Draco-humanoids and other variations. This she did to smuggle things in and out of strongholds of the pinheaded beings' supply bases. And also, she smuggled things into the pinheaded beings' military bases. This here takes quite a bit of talent, smuggling things in and out of your highest enemy. This smuggling, which would provide the spy part of her career as a means to build up a nice cachet of money to be able later in her life, hopefully, to go to another planetary system, which she would never live that long. She smuggled out of the pinheaded supply bases a high-strength, really powerful fuel in which that would be used for the Draco fighter crafts that these there that would use had a much higher percentage of recovery of downed pilots and crews because they were using this super fuel in their ships that used that of their enemies. Unlike the pinheaded being bases, these Draco bases that she worked out of on those 2 planets did not have nearly as much supplies at any given time compared to the pinheaded beings. She smuggled in to the pinheaded beings' bases a cheap duplicate of fuels which would be used on the pinheaded ships and they would stutter and groan and stutter while running on this fuel when they're in tight formation battle movements. This causes seemingly endless bad side effects for those ships also. The other item she smuggled into those bases of the pinheaded beings was the cheap version knockoff of a very highly prized drink spice that the Dracos enjoyed, that the pinheaded beings thought they were stealing, and it would be their prized version that they would drink on their celebration of wartime. This cheap version, though, she smuggled in, had mind limiter ingredients that were very hard to catch when they were inspected in a lab. These are very high-tech mind limiter ingredients, which caused the pinheaded pilots and commanders to have quirky, random moments of no thought during battle when you need it the most. Her next 3 lives on one of those 2 planets was that of a reptilian at 7 foot 11 inches high, spying for the military and the reptilians. In many conflicts between both the pinheaded beings and the Draco humanoid, and also Draco dragons mining colonies. This was not a mining colony, however, it was a very disguised military testing area for their new equipment. This was a very complicated life Hillary had, for the variables were changing so fast in the conflicts in every direction. The next 2 lives, she went on to the massive Orion planetary systems. There, though, being a humanoid at 5 foot 11 inches, a bit short there, at working as a research colony scientist, primarily working on this ideas of high-tech binding agents to be able to later be used to protect scout spaceships that would go into very chemically hard surface air environments. This would be able to protect against the dangerous elemental chemicals from leaching into the ship's cabins right through the metal and the shields. But she was always in the mood, always in the mood, on the on the side to plant this super micro, which was developed in her labs, which would be used to spy on her customers without them knowing and be viewed in her private office high-tech systems. This here would keep her in the loop of what the different customers would need even before they started their trip to that research colony that she worked at of her customers. So many thought she was a mystic for always knowing what to have in stock, so on what they needed versus what they asked. But these two lifetimes were long. Strangely enough, they were long. Usually these situations cause a very short life on a very short plank. However, she had two long lives there. And though she did not understand she had past lives, she still understood that something was missing out of her life that she should probably know. Now, the last 7 lives was in the Draco system. 3 as a reptilian humanoid, and a female 8 feet 10 inches. She should have been on a volleyball team. She had larger bluish black eyes, kind of freaky. She inherited a transport cargo company from her mother's side of the family in earlier years of her adulthood. This was from her mother, as said, but her mother had been sniped off while attending a conference, being in the wrong place at the wrong time, not being the target, the official said, whether that was true or not. But then, hey, if you're going to trust the officials on anything they say, you deserve what you get. In that second life, as the reptilian humanoid, Hillary would spend much of her adult life as a self-taught spy. Here again, a spy, looking for the information that law keepers and their little pets would be missing. In the third life, she was a transportation team pilot, transporting alloys from local moons to the home planet industrial complex companies. Her next 4 lives were very strange, and when looked upon from Tralaka and his other spirit being aides, that she was here, she was of short gray, deep within the Draco planetary system. Hillary Clinton's inner spirit was in a short gray within that planetary system. This is something strange here, standing at 4 feet 8 inches in height, though this is not in the formal manner that the records in an u.f.o library would show. However, after Tralaka's conversations with a few other spirit beings led to the point that the inner spirit being that is Hillary Clinton was captured lifetime before, as it was en route to the next series of lifetimes, most likely being seen that would be in the Vega system. Whether it was captured, that is her inner spirit, for what she would aid others with, or for her traits, very, very long and knowledgeable of spying and piloting, and that of being a high-class smuggler who was so good they could smuggle both ways to multiple customers, multiple ways, with her always ending up with the bigger deal, while cheating multiple enemies and keeping the good customer at the same time. Many questions here, yet keeping all the business with her for so many solar years. Though this being speculation between ancient spirits on how this occurred, she ended up being a short gray at 4 foot 8 inches, which ended up being her role in those lifetimes as being a gray. It was for spying on all 4 of those lives. Someplace spying on anyone not fitting into the gray neighborhood. New term here, gray neighborhood. And cities as a properly trained gray citizen. This would be the very challenging role for Hillary, keeping the profile as a common short gray citizen while she received sizable amounts of privileges. This here is the ancient spirit tralaka. Most important here is so much information here that was brought through for this video. And the right, notice the different challenges and the changes occurring in different planetary systems with beings' past life streams. And the knowledge that was gained that some of this is which is in the 21st century now here on Earth. Now, involving different variations of species, though, in the ancient past. An experience that occurred in very much of what is known of the living universe. It is by degrees, or rather by fractional differences and or great mountains of difference, do you see from what you listeners have had or have yet to experience within your career and personal lives. 4 experiences. Each life stream, whether it be an old stream or young stream or even ancient and so forth, everything is measured in the different lives for where you're going to be versus where you were. Unless you have races that manipulate and pluck your spirit out of where it's supposed to be heading and put it someplace else in which you will be in service to them, which is a whole nother story. This here is the ancient spirit tralaka. Good night.